Hey, my friends, welcome to today's episode. We have an absolutely amazing guest today. He is somebody from the moment I met him, I was like, oh my goodness, he has to come on the podcast. His name is Devan Sandiford. He is a writer, a storyteller, and the founder of Unreeling Storytelling. His stories have been featured in so many amazing places like the Washington Post, the Moth podcast, NPR, Speak Up Storytelling, many podcasts. And he has so many incredible workshops that he's done. So not only in his work, he used to be on the community team at the Moth, where he would host workshops and encourage people to step into the power of their storytelling. But he now is a new member of the Gates Foundation, and he's doing storytelling work there. I'm so excited for him. His gift is undeniable, and he is, as you will feel momentarily, somebody that can bring the incredible power of storytelling out of each and every one of us, in just the way that he shows up in a space. So Devan and I met as I was a member of the Moth workshop that I mentioned a few episodes back, where we were sharing story of first generation and second generation immigrants. It was an amazing cohort of us that were all together. For me, it was joining a group of strangers that became friends, became connections for sure through the power of storytelling. Some of the people I talk to more than others, but you feel even in just the 5 minutes of storytelling, you feel like you know someone so much more significantly through story. So if you are somebody that's been exploring how you share your story or how you talk about different moments in your life, or if you're in therapy working through the different aspects of your story in that setting, this episode I think will be a really interesting one for you. Devan is so incredibly generous in this episode and sharing some really powerful moments in his life, some really challenging moments in his life, and some really vulnerable stories, both in the present moment and in the past. And so, if you are somebody that's trying to navigate any version of grief, trauma, identity questioning, or identity advocacy, this episode is for you. He is so open talking about the aspects of our racial discrimination we have embedded in our society and how it impacts you as a human being, both you individually and the people in your life, and the way that we view ourselves in a society that is so centered on dehumanizing through our systems in a silent, unspoken way, oftentimes. Sometimes it's spoken. But Devan and I dive into so many different aspects of the power of storytelling, and also being able to, as a story listener, be able to hear between the lines, to read between the lines, and to encourage curiosity and conversation. So you can make true, genuine connections with people as a listener, to showcase that that person's being witnessed, but also as a listener feeling for and understanding the invitation to tap into your own vulnerability as well. Something that's so powerful about stories is it creates a space for us to have permission to be heard and witnessed in ways that in a lot of other parts of our lives, especially if you're growing up in America, we haven't always been given permission to do. So often, the times and the spaces you're supposed to be speaking up is when things are polished or perfect or overly, quote, professional. And unfortunately, for so many of us, we haven't been given the permission to even have the microphone, to have our voices heard. And so when you're given that opportunity and you feel like you have to do it through a particular lens, voice, or script, so often you lose the power of the humanity in your story. And so in this episode, if you are somebody that has been navigating or juggling with how do I show up and how do I speak my story out loud as me, not necessarily through the robotic script I've been taught, Devan drops some really great nuggets of wisdom on how to do that. Um, I'm so excited because not only will you meet Devan, but you'll meet some incredible people that have been in his life too through story. So without further ado, here is my friend Devan. Devan, welcome to Checkbox Other. I am so excited that you are here today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and just to be able to have this open space and conversation with you. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Me too. Me too. Just so you know, I feel like anybody that I've talked to about where we met, I'm like, Devan, you need to get to know Devan. He's going to change the world, by the way, everybody. So for those of you listening, you're welcome. Here's Devan. If you've heard me talking about him before, here he is. If you haven't, you're welcome that you get introduced to him today. So Devan, the first thing I always do is I give the mic to my amazing guest and I say, hey, you want to tell us the Cliff Notes version of your journey, the twists, the turns, the aha moments that led you to where you are today, and what you're really excited about doing out in the world?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's comes from the place of you saying, I'm going to change the world. And I think for me, it's like, we're going to change the world. My journey, I think, starts where um, when I was 6 years old, my mom's youngest brother, my uncle, was shot and killed by the police outside of my childhood home. So um, at that time, me and my older siblings weren't there, but my mom, my dad, and my grandma were all there, living in this moment as like my uh, uncle went through like a bit of rage, and then also in the moments when he was gunned down and killed outside of our home. And for me, what was really difficult as like a 6 year old and what I kind of carried forward was that nobody in my family talked about what happened. Um, and I'm sure that there was like at least one conversation, but I don't remember ever talking about it, ever talking about my uncle. And for me, I pretty much carried forward this desire to like hold on to this silence. I didn't want to bring things up that I knew would be painful for people who had experienced this or anything from my life that was painful. I kind of just kept them all to myself and did a job trying to be the peacekeeper everywhere I went. And I honestly was fine doing that for my whole life until I had kids of my own. And I saw the ways in which like my silence was hurting them first. And then in the process of seeing that it was hurting them, taking away their agency, I saw how much it was hurting myself and my wife and um, wanting to do right by like my younger self and by my sons. I decided to start like going and sharing the stories. I didn't want the hurt to live in my body anymore. And so I started to go out and do these like storytelling events. Um, and doing a brave thing, but also still wanting to be in a space where I wasn't hurting the people around me. And so sharing them to people, to strangers, I think, and coming to a place of realizing how much relief there was of getting these things out of my body and wanting others to experience this. I dove pretty quickly into like this community storytelling space, inviting others to share their stories through a platform that I started with a friend called Unreal Storytelling, which brought me around to the Moth and working with their community program, and why I say, yeah, it's going to be us changing the world from from the space of each of us sharing the things that we've been holding on to and allowing those things to connect us and to drive us forward. The impact that we can have when we understand that we have control and agency for the decisions we're going to make and the things that we can do when we're not afraid.
I love that on so many levels. And I'm so excited because I feel like we're going to dive into all the little pieces of all the little tangents. I was like, we can talk about this for an hour and that for an hour and this for an hour. Um, the piece that you talked about your body, the healing that it gives your body to speak something out loud, I feel like is a disconnect that we don't often bring together. And for those of us, the amount of head nodding, and I know you and I have talked about this separately,
Right.
of living in a place where you're like, we don't talk about the tough things. It's like, it actually starts to like break down your insides. And so the beautiful part of not just the idea of like share your story, but to understand that it is an active healing modality, to be able to use storytelling for that, to create ease, to ease the pressure, but also the kind of destructive feeling that it is to be swallowing down traumatic things in particular, is I think so important as we're in this time and this space where we're talking a lot more about it is important to say things out loud, but oftentimes people think that same thing. I mean, fellow peacekeeper here. Like, if I say it, will it make it worse? If I say it, will it make everything fall down? If I say it, will it actually make something that might or might not be true even more true? Is
Right.
such a fascinating thing. Again, as a 6-year-old, having that complex level of understanding, while also your brain not formed enough to really understand what you're absorbing around you. And so that's such a fascinating way to think about, one, healing, but two, I think that I love how you said kind of agency, of being able to understand like who you are in a place, and the things that are happening to you or happening outside of you aren't necessarily the same thing. But oftentimes when we internalize it all becomes us, we, one, I. It's the weight is on my shoulders. And so I love so much of just the healing side of storytelling, because I feel like so often, especially in a world of 15 seconds of 15 minutes of fame, that you can
Right.
have your own platform on your phone, like, it's not a showy thing. It really is healing process for you individually, but also an invitation for so many other people to be able to tap into this like incredible source of humanity, relief, and connection as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I talk to people about like speaking up later in life. Sometimes I come across people who are like, "Oh yeah, no, I did that," and like they started the journey so much earlier, and it's like an obvious thing to them. So, uh, the thing that I always return to with the sharing of our stories, like it actually being painful, like for you in the process of talking about it, but then also for me in my journey, getting back to a place of like having the conversation with my mom and my family, that it wasn't just like only the liberation and the freedom part, but actually the painful part of actually causing them to relive this of sorts. And so it was not a thing where it's like only, yes, all the rainbows. You actually have to go quite a lot of the pain that wasn't dealt with. So uh, always a reminder to like how hard it is constantly, and for the people who are still like holding on to things to not feel like, oh, this is obvious and I should just do it, but actually how difficult it is.
Yeah, and the other part too, I love that you said like it's not necessarily encouraged. And yes, in family units, not necessarily encouraged, but also in our society in America, it's not really encouraged to talk about hard things. It's encouraged to have like, okay, so the problem here is my solution that I figured out 2 seconds later, and oh my goodness, look how amazing I am. Versus like when you're dealing with pain and trauma, like it isn't an easy button solution. It is sometimes going back and sitting in it. I remember one of my therapists, uh, she was like, all right, we're going to have you sit and talk about this. And I always was like, feel like I'm a pig sitting in shit when I do this. Like, I have no interest in that. Can we move through it? She's like, no, you have to sit in this. And I was like, I don't understand how this is useful. And then now I'm like, remember when I used to say that to you? She's like, I'm very aware of your resistance of
Right.
sitting in the terrible emotion of it all. So I think it makes sense, right? Like, it's a sense of, it's a protection mechanism. Like that hurt not just me, it hurts people I love. I don't want to go back there. Oh my God, I mean, my body's even tearing up, even reliving that, how powerful it is to give yourself permission as a human being. We have a level of resilience to deal with pain. Doesn't mean we want to be there all the time, but when we're trying to avoid it all the time, it doesn't mean that it's actually gone away. So it is a
Right.
really fascinating dynamic that I think one of my favorite things about watching how our brains can do things is that we know so little about how how
Right.
amazingly complex we are as human beings, and it's scary to walk into the unknown of like I'm not really sure what's going to happen on the other side of this, especially when you're going into a situation where, as a little kid, it was completely out of your control. You're
Right.
walking into something where you're like, I don't actually know what's going to happen. This doesn't feel safe to do, but really knowing that sometimes it is actually on the other side of that where there is the release, the kind of freedom on the other side of the, I always talk about it like a boogeyman in the closet, that feeling that like you open it and you're like, oh my goodness, there's nothing there. Okay. The thing that happened, but it doesn't mean that there is some big terrible thing on the other side. Um,
Right.
okay. So I want to open up the floor for my favorite question.
Okay.
Um, I would love to hear about a time, and if you have more than one time, all are welcome, where you have felt other, different, or as though you didn't belong in your life, and how it's impacted you today.
Yeah. How much time do you have? I have a million moments. But I think when you ask the question, my mind goes to the first time that I felt othered, probably because it was a shock to my brain and like didn't know that that was a thing. And so shortly after my uncle was killed, we moved away from our home in Miami to a suburban town in California, started going to this school my dad taught, my siblings had gone to previously, and a private school inland from Los Angeles. And I was, 6 years old, starting in first grade. Really excited to start school actually because my previous year in kindergarten, I hadn't gone to school. I'd stayed home with my mom. She had stayed home with me. I was born. But I was excited to start school and to be able to like play with other kids. And shortly after the school year started, there were like games that immediately started on the playground. And one game I remember in particular was like the kids were talking about this thing called cooties I had never heard of in my life. So the boys were describing the process of like running away from the girls. If they ever caught you, that they would like kiss you, and that you would get cooties. They were like really terrified of this. So for me, moving from Miami, I actually had a little girlfriend that I used to kiss on the back in the backyard of our home. So I was like, I don't know what these guys are talking about.
Mhm.
This is the best game ever. Like the girls are gonna chase us and kiss all over us. This is amazing. So like sure enough, we go out into the recess yard. The girls are chasing us through lunch tables, past all the like jungle gyms, down into the grass and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And they'd eventually catch a boy and like, yeah, they'd all gang up and kiss on him. I was like, this is just amazing. And in the process of playing this game, I would just like start to feel like, the girls weren't particularly chasing me, and I didn't understand right off the bat.
Yeah.
But then as we played the game more and more, really started to understand and see that the girls were actually afraid of me.
Mm,
I was one of two black kids in a class full of 27 kids.
yeah.
And anytime I would get close to the girls, they would get like kind of terrified and run away scared.
Mhm.
And I can remember being in that moment and feeling like the discrepancy between seeing the other boys like get smothered and
Right.
seeing the girls be afraid of me, and um, feeling like some version of trash that
Yeah.
was like thrown out on the curb. Um, and sadly, I'd already learned that lesson about not talking about the things. So I didn't tell my teacher or my parents or my siblings or anyone. I kind of just like lived with that. Uh, it would always come up over and over at this in this neighborhood I grew up in. The differences that I had, my large brown nose, my top lip that was brown. The kids would also, ask me all the time why my skin was the color of food. So for me, at a young age, not talking to anybody who knew, I started to internalize these things and the ways in which that I was so different from everyone. So that was really a really hard time for me. And I remember the next year after that, second grade, um, fortunately, I think it's unfortunately, yes, finding two really close friends who have been lifelong friends, twins, Michael and Mark. I got a chance to meet and just be able to like live what it was to be, 7, 8 years old, having black abundance before we had the term of black abundance. So I remember them being like the coolest kids, and the three of us, getting closer and closer all throughout elementary, middle school, and high school, just like starting to run amok of like, oh, okay, this is who I can be when I'm surrounded by people, while at the same time still holding on to like, the differences and the upbringing that was the predominantly white neighborhood that I grew up in.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many pieces of my body that felt there with you. Like I felt like we were in first grade together. Um, Thank you for sharing that. I think that there is so much beauty in the resilience, right? And this is what you're like, I'm talking about something painful right now. And also the amazing ability for a child to see and notice things that oftentimes like, oh, they're just a kid, they don't understand yet. It's like, no, you were able to figure things out relatively quickly of how the marching orders or the societal beliefs were set in place. While at the same time, you're like, I lived my whole life not feeling like that. Like I've had 6 years, 7 years, of doing this and not had to have this type of reality. And also, you all are acting like you don't know it, like actively not acknowledging that that's what's happening. But I see it and I can't say it, and you're not saying it, but you're having a very visceral reaction to me. And I know who I am. Why are you operating that way? And again, I think that there is so much power as you're talking about creating space within space to feel held and to feel supported. Like, I feel like that is so pivotal because when we live in a world that has a normal being one very specific type of person, a heteronormative white cis male kind of vibe, even
Mm-hmm.
though we're talking about women doing the same thing, we have this same normalcy that actually makes all of us feel like we can't be full people, but we don't realize that's what's happening. So that so
Yeah.
in order for us to belong, we have to just fall in line with these rules that are unspoken and unwritten. And sometimes they're written and sometimes they're spoken, but they're so pervasive that at such a young age, you're already separating yourself from your humanity in a game that is meant to be fun or funny or, trying to figure yourself out in the world. And it's just, again, so fascinating. I mean, I hope this is why you're so good at telling stories, Evan. Like, I felt every moment of that. I like felt like my feet, my shoes getting all full of those like chips the like wood chips on the playground, like all those things as you're saying it. I felt like I was right there. And for those of you that might not have played the game of cooties and didn't have a huge smile on your face as Devin was initially talking about it, remembering that like, oh God, the dreaded feeling of, oh my God, if somebody else touches me, and everyone's going to think I'm infected with cooties. Like, I hope there's some element of your life where you have felt that feeling of, this is unknown. This is what the rules of the game are. Maybe I believe those or not, but now I am in the game and I have to figure out the rules while I'm in it. I feel like that was such a helpful way of navigating not just life as a first grader, but life as an adult as well. I think we're also, I mean, the last few years, cooties in themselves have been such a
Right.
huge energetic pull for people of like, your breath is not safe for me. You don't even have to touch me, but you can't
Right.
be me. And how we navigate the other in that way too, right? Like seeing as a threat and then also acting as though our biases aren't informing the way we hierarchy our threat
Yeah.
is what we've been seeing front and center in the news and the media, but also within our families, within our homes, and the re-entry back into the world. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you, as I just dumped so many things. I talk a lot, I get so excited. How do you feel that that experience has kind of informed today? I feel like you do such a wonderful job in the way that you hold space to welcome those kinds of conversations to come to the forefront.
Yeah. Before I go there,
Yeah.
something that you said really reminded me of, I mean, probably the brilliance of me as a 6-year-old, or like all of us in the resilience, but uh, thinking of the cooties and like understanding in a way of like me being the infected person of sorts now, but actually, uh, from Miami, where there was a lot of Hispanics and a lot of people of color, to this place where it was predominantly white.
Yeah.
And um, what I remember doing as a 6-year-old after this was not like feeling down for myself. I actually flipped it in my head completely to make it as though it was a part of the game, that it was like my responsibility as like this this being to protect the boys, and so like the girls would chase the boys and I would chase the girls away from the boys, and kind of somewhat became the hero of the boys. And I was always doing like the funniest things. uh I used to moon the class. Apparently, a friend of mine told me that they remembered me doing that. So I think there was a bit of like me learning to shape shift this equation so that I didn't have to deal with that. And so um, to think of how that experience informed my life, I think there is a bit of that, the ability to like, here's what you're telling me and here's what I'm going to turn it into so that I can feel fine,
Yeah.
while at the same time not really processing how I'm not fine. And so I think there has been the like what it means to be me as like a humorous person that can turn any situation into something that's funny and fun, and the also informing the need for going to therapy, really, but only in the process of like seeing it as a parent, really being able to see how much work I needed to do, um, and even just the ways I'm showing up on the street, to like be thinking of who's looking at me, who's like thinking of me in a certain way,
Yeah.
and pretty much going to any space, uh, whether I'm on vacation, going to like France, or if I'm like in a room and like actively counting the number of Black people in space, when I actually could be enjoying myself and having a fun time. And so uh, it's for one informed me to look out for people who are on the outside, and
Yeah.
finding ways to like pull them on into the inside, find the connection between us, that allows us to feel seen and heard, included. And then it's also informed my parenting as it relates to just making sure the messages that uh, my sons are receiving are provided with a little bit of context, to make sure that they know that whatever's said doesn't mean that that's the truth, that there's a whole other side. And so it's funny to hear my sons talk about it now. They're like, "It's so obvious, Dad." Like, it's only obvious because we've now been talking about it. Like, it wasn't obvious for me as a 6-year-old to not internalize.
And the emotion was obvious. right? The emotion of it. You're like, I don't know what this feeling is, but I know this feeling isn't something I want to be feeling all the time, nor do I want everybody else to be feeling. So this is we shove that down versus you being like, all right, we're going to create space to open it up before you feel these things. So it does feel safe to be able to say, oh, okay, it's not me. I'm not the problem here. We're swimming in a soup of a whole bunch of complexity. And there is a place, it's like you talking about your friends, that there is a place to come to find solace, even though the outside world, or at least the playground, might not be able to give that space for you. And I will tell you, I too grew up in a predominantly white town. And I very young remember people saying things to me, and both my parents acted as though being a child of an interracial marriage was not something that anybody needed to talk about. They were so we were so much more evolved that we didn't talk about that. And also, like, the whole idea of American public schools, that like racism was solved with Martin Luther King, right? And so whenever these things would pop up and that would be a potential thought in my brain, or said out loud in any kind of way, I was like, we are so much more evolved than this. That can't be it. And when
Right.
you remove what is a very significant impact, and really the root cause of a lot of these types of experiences, where growing up, I had boys be like, I couldn't date you, I can't date you because you're Black. Or even more so, I remember my friends, their parents, one friend of mine who was on the soccer team with me, it was a travel soccer team, so like parents had to kind of pass on and off because whatever hours of the day you're doing that. And her uncle, who she lived with, as like he was her guardian, had told her it was okay to hang out with me because I was one of the good ones.
Mm.
And I remember thinking at first, what does he mean? And then being like, oh, I know what he means. Oh, he's so stupid, which was a short circuit for not feeling the harm that was inflicted. And it is, the survival mode that we create. And I love how you talked about changing the game, because it is the place that kind of creates and holds hope in the midst of something that is so harmful and so destructive and so dehumanizing. And so I love young you for that, and current you for that, because I think something that we constantly have to do to hold hope in spaces of oppression, and spaces of when we're dehumanizing one another or the world around us, as systems that are just set up to do that and aren't willing to kind of reflect.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I want to hear from you a little bit about what it's been like to have the experience of being around some really, really powerful women. I know this is one of the things that you had sent ahead of time, being like, I want to talk about this. And I'll talk about this all day.
Mhm.
Um, we both come from women that came to this country by themselves before their family to kind of set roots and immigrate here. And I can only imagine that that has informed so much of your life, your family structure. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience is like, and how kind of the influence of really strong, resilient women has impacted your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me it was really interesting because I somewhat knew it, but I didn't really understand it until probably like within the last 2 years.
Mm,
Um, so finally, when I had started having conversations with my mom about my uncle, um, is when she started to share like so much of her journey, like kind of like the asks that I was bringing to her was like, I want to know more about like our family and our ancestry, and to know my uncle other than the way in which he died. And so in that process, my mom really got a chance to talk about their journey to America. My
mm,
mom, both my mom and my dad. My dad is from Barbados, and my mom's from Trinidad and Tobago. And so my grandma, actually my mom's mom, moved from Trinidad and Tobago to America by herself, Brooklyn, really trying to set up a life for the family, but having to leave the entire family back in Trinidad until they could get to a place for my mom's dad to come over. So leaving all of the kids, my mom and four brothers in Trinidad, until they could afford to come over, bring everybody over. And so um, for my mom, my grandma, that was difficult enough already to have to come to another country, and to set up shop for an entire family. And then for my mom, she came over around like middle schoolish age. Um, and Brooklyn at the time being a very tough place to live, but still a tough place to live. But uh, for her being an immigrant here and having a very strong Trinidadian accent, people, um, her classmates actually thought she spoke French. And so they would either make fun of her or ask her to interpret or translate for one of their French teachers. So there was a lot of like difficult moments. And I think I didn't really understand the strength of my mom and my grandma and my dad, but like my my mom and my grandma, because when you think of like a strong black woman, I think there's this image of somebody who's like very vocal and very like in face. And for my both my mom and my grandma, I'd say they're the on the quieter side. Like my grandma did love to talk and like have conversations with her friends. She'd be on the phone for hours and hours. Um, but more on the quiet side and only like in the process of starting to learn the difference between like silence just for silence sake and resilience. I think I've been able to see the ways in which like my mom was able to like hold my family and to like hold herself after this very traumatic event with her brother, to be able to have like a certain peace that would allow me and my siblings to grow up and learn and to like have moments of levity, to a place where I could get to having a little immigration of my own, not to another country, but like to move away from this predominantly white neighborhood back to Brooklyn, um, and to like have space to like start to speak up, um, only came as a result of my mom being able to like have the resilience to hold us and like allow me to learn what it meant to find peace even in the midst of like turmoil, and the strength that that takes to have that sort of like silence and peace, as opposed to like being the strong black woman that's like very vocal. And
Yeah.
so it took me a long time to learn of that strength within my mother and within my grandmother, and then also within myself, because I think being a black man and man in general, the idea of strength is something that is like external and like tough and like somewhat in
Mhm.
your face. So to understand my mom's strength, and then to see that that could be strength for me, to be tender and vulnerable, as a form of strength, has really opened me up to uh, understand the family lineage and the power that I come from and the power that I can have both in the like making sure I'm taking care of others and the choices of words that I'm saying, and then being also able to speak up the truth for the things that are hard, and to open others up to do the same.
I, so many things. The power of silence that's not uh, an armor or a wound, that silence can be a really powerful healing mechanism too, when you know when you need to take that time in that space, not necessarily feeling you have to be vocal right away, which again is what we were talking about, right? Like we lived in silence and then we're speaking it out loud, and now we're going back to like that silence is actually a really good thing, and in some spaces, and creating the nuance of living as a person in between those two kind of polarities. Because it's so funny. One of the things that um I've learned over the years of just meeting people from other countries, is that people are coming here and like, oh my God, you Americans talk about everything. We never talk about those things. Like I remember I met a girl we were waiting for a train a couple months ago, and she was here on a fellowship, and she was like, I've been in school. This is my like master's part, whatever it was. And she goes, school's so different here. I said, oh, really? Why? She goes, because the teachers ask you what you think and you answer. And I was like, oh, she's like, yeah, we don't do that. We learn things and then we write them in the test and then it's done. And I was just like, I mean, right? Like, oh, that does make sense. And I was trying to explain to her, I was like, so the further along you get in education here, the expectation is that you have a lot to say, but oftentimes, when you're processing really complex things, you might not be in a place to say them all at first. You might be processing. You may need to do your own kind of process of understanding, and then you might inform differently than just grabbing a microphone and saying it as loud as possible. And again, we have these versions of what success, leadership, and knowledge look like in our country that looks like a very loud, boisterous person with a microphone that's confident and very certain. And when there are a lot of things moving and you're having to think about a lot of different people and process your emotions at the same time, sometimes creating space for even just like, doesn't even need to be silence, but maybe more quiet spaces, just times where you can have actually work through the emotions of what is happening, and also create space for other people to be heard or for other people to feel safe without having to be in the role of listener is really important. And I think that that's such a powerful thing that I feel like I've witnessed from other cultures reacting to the Americanisms. And
Mhm.
so I can imagine, I will say, my father is very similar. I'm like, and he's just like, okay, are you done? I have 2 words to say. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, cool. And just really honoring and understanding the cultural differences too, because the American culture, for better or for worse, uh, is that same kind of normal I was talking about before on the playground, that we're all operating like this is what everybody operates like. But in reality, there's a huge amount of the population that does not live in this space. And especially people that are immigrating here, it is a culture shock in and of itself. So yes, from coast to coast moving, but also just like the verbosity and the ability that we think we have or need to have to express ourselves loudly, especially Black women being the strong, resilient Black women who are going to stand up for everybody and no one necessarily is going to stand up for them, is such, again, a belief that we're only like two-dimensional humans, that we
Right.
don't need all of the aspects of the human existence to be able to be supported.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the idea of like false like dichotomies and like, or even not even that, but like it took me a while to understand that silence could be both like damaging and be something that was necessary.
Yeah.
And so like maybe 30 years of not talking about it was more than necessary. But
Yeah.
I came across this quote um, from Khalil Gibran, my my older son, middle name is Khalil, named after Gibran. But I came across this quote from Khalil Gibran that really resonated with me. That said, "You talk when you cease to be at peace with your thoughts." And for a long time, I had been like really down on myself for how dare you like be silent for so long. But when I read that quote, it really like informed me that like I have been waiting this whole time to speak up at the right time
Mm.
when I knew that like I would have not necessarily the perfect words to say, but the right way to express this in a way that was like not harmful for my mom, but at the same time liberating for me and my family, um, to carry us to the next place where we need to go.
Oh, well, that quote needs to be written on my wall somewhere or something. That's as a very verbose human, I feel that in a lot of ways. I feel like sometimes we use language to fill space of discomfort more than actively having the conversations we want to have. And so I love that idea of actually creating that time and that space for your thoughts to be at a place where what you're saying is what you want to be saying versus you feeling like you should for other reasons.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that you mentioned was this belief that masculinity needs to be certain, strong, stoic, silent, and also kind of um I don't know, overbearing is the word that's coming to mind, but like,
Yeah.
that there needs to be this sense of certainty and my voice above all, and I can't show any weakness as a man, because if I do, then you'll find out that I'm not actually as strong as a man is supposed to be. And we hear a lot about the like man box, about like what you need to be in order to be called or thought of as a man, or if you make any kind of stumble, be a man is the response to it. Like how destructive
Right.
our language has shifted our beliefs around masculinity and what it is to be a man. And I would say that vulnerability is in all of those things that were on the other side of the responses, is constantly been kind of picked away, that it's not necessarily an option if you want to be seen as strong as a man to be vulnerable.
Right.
Where what, at least my personal belief, and what I think we're witnessing a lot, where people are becoming a little bit more more one with themselves, is that vulnerability is actually more powerful than that stoic silence. As you've actively stepped into spaces of your own vulnerability, but then carved intentionally spaces for other people to step into that, whether it's something they do all the time or it's their first time. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of relationship between vulnerability and masculinity that you've witnessed in your journey, and also creating these spaces for people to kind of play around with that?
Yeah, I, I think for me, I had pushed off the vulnerability and the emotional side of myself for a long time. So that was a pretty central characteristic of who I am,
Yeah.
just from the idea of like what it is to have value as a man, especially growing up. I think there was often times just like toughening up that came through. So I think a time that comes to me very viscerally. So for me, I wanted to be uh, a dad since I was like maybe 10 years old.
Hmm.
And so I was very excited when my wife told me that we were expecting. And um, even from just the first moments when our son started to kick in my wife's room, I would read to him in the room like every night.
Yeah.
Have moments, and uh, I think as I started like my writing journey, I had put out this story about wanting to get to my son's bus stop on time, and I had been running behind because I had stopped with my younger son to get like a smoothie because we had tons of time. The New York City bus system was like running behind, and I was freaking out, getting there late, like a very emotional response to my body. And I put this story out, and the place where I put it out was like this called Writing Class Radio, and hosts of this podcast talked about like they wanted to cut the initial part of the story where I said that I was like crying on the New York City bus because it just wasn't believable.
Oh,
Like you know, why would a dad care that much? Like, and they recognized it as they went through. Like, oh my God, like look at us, they're hearing themselves talk about what it means to be a man. And but for
yeah.
me, when they were saying that, it was very much uh, like you don't deserve to have this feeling that this doesn't match up with who you are. And so for me, it was like very intentional with like if something doesn't seem true, like it doesn't seem true that a man would be this emotional, that's like actually a moment for me to speak up and to be vulnerable and to talk about it because that is true. And the fact that we think that it is unbelievable is the damaging thing that we've come to a place where something that is true feels like it's not true. And so I think I had already started to have this vulnerability journey and wanting to bring that in both for myself and for other men because I know uh, many other men in my life have these thoughts of like, even my brother, I don't know if he would want me to share the story, but like the feeling of like, I never cry.
Yeah.
And then to remember actually several moments of us being in moments where there was like those emotions and tears. And so I think it like comes back to the point of like dehumanizing. Like we're not able to have the full range of emotions because it's cutting off part of our humanity.
Yeah. Just so you know, I wrote down like 17 different notes because there's like four different resources. I'm like, oh my God, that's it. You just nailed it. Blah, blah. It's so funny because oh, when you were talking about being 10 and knowing you wanted to be a dad and feeling like so viscerally, there is this was like my formative learning as a kid. It was this, I guess it was like a TV special, but to me, it was everything. It was called Free to Be You and Me. It was in the 70s. So I was not born in the 70s, but it was part of my upbringing for sure. That VHS was like went to the last of its life, the amount of times I watched it. But there was one segment that was called William Wants a Doll. And it was about this little boy that all he wanted, he didn't want all the trucks and the whatever the masculine toys were. He's like, I just want a doll because he was so in love with the idea of being a father and watching how his father and how much an impact his father had on him. It was literally, he was like, this is the most amazing thing to care for another person to have. And the whole, and I'll find it, I'll put it in the show notes because it's like again 3-year-old me watch this, but it was like all these, there's visuals of all these voices telling him how wrong he is and how he's a sissy and like all of these things because he wants to show love to another human being. And
Mm-hmm.
that's learned so young when it's like, oh no, you don't get to play with dolls, you don't get to caretake, you need to be around this thing of destruction instead. Like you need like the tanks and the GI Joe and you need that, is such a interesting experience at such a young age when you have Devin's like not 10 years old. That's what's happening. Like, by the way, get on board. That's
Right.
part of my, that's my journey here. So it is really funny though, because that's at such a young age, you're being taught the opposite, or being taught that to care and to want that as a formative element of your life isn't necessarily the role of a father or a role of a strong man to be that emotionally invested in this. And then also, I mean, sitting on a bus and crying, like, how can we not? Like, every person has felt an overall to cry at some point. The
Yeah.
fact that we're not allowed to, and especially men are not allowed to, is unfortunate, right? But also biologically, one of the things we need to actually release our stress cycle is the ability to cry. Crying is one of the like main things that actually allow us to have our stress not eat us alive. And so for it to be seen as off limits is stunting our biological systems in a way that actually create more inflammation and more problems. If we see how many sicknesses, illnesses, and inflammatory diseases we have this culture that doesn't allow men to feel, and I wouldn't even say cry. The range of emotion is like anger, maybe
Right.
in the right circumstance. Otherwise, nothing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about why we're so shocked that there is such a situation where men are having such a hard time right now. And again, those of you that are listening that are like, feminists talk like men having a hard time, the world's set up for yes and right, like all things can be there can be many things true at once.
Right.
One of the things that it was International Men's Day last week, and I saw this post that was giving all the stats around the male experience with regard to how our society is not supporting men. And it was about homelessness, it was about crime, it was about suicide, it was about violence, it was about so many different things, and the numbers were so skewed that men were kind of at the center of a lot of these things. And if we're not why aren't we talking about this on International Men's Day, that our culture is creating a situation where men aren't actually allowed to be thriving human beings.
Mm-hmm.
We're pitting men against themselves, not even just each other, against themselves from such a young age, that
Yeah.
we're surprised when our culture is not necessarily supporting a whole man as their adults. And then the last piece that came in is there is an article in Psychology Today that like went viral / created some controversy, that was around the kind of the age of the lonely man.
Mm.
And that you talk about therapy many times in this. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that so often men aren't even encouraged to go to therapy or talk about things, whether it's within their family or with somebody that is like actually educated and credentialed to be able to support you through this. That we're in an epidemic of loneliness for
Mm.
men, but we're still not acknowledging that. And so I think that you creating a space for vulnerability, talking about vulnerability and leaning into it when you're like, oh, you're telling me not to, this is actually the clue for me to do it double. Thanks
Right.
so much. Is the permission, but also the thing about it is like there's data everywhere. Saying that it's problematic is not
Yeah.
just about like, oh, let's talk about our feelings. Yes, let's. And also there is a huge, not even just case study, generational like issue we're going to have if we keep perpetuating these systems of dehumanization within men, wherever along the spectrum you fall within your relationship to masculinity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to think of like feminists and of course to like center women in things that need to be done is 100% true. The most important aspects are for women. Um, but then also within that includes men
Yeah.
and the, the devaluing of feminine traits. And so then like those things are also held within men. And so I'll say for me, like all of the things that that's true for, but then also my dad, um, I didn't never saw him as like a tender, softer version, but he was
Mm.
like always a present dad, and
Yeah.
probably what informed me wanting to be a dad. He was everywhere I was. I can remember him. He was a soccer coach at the high school. I can remember him waking me up as a child every Sunday to see if I wanted to go to the practice with him with the high school team. And me, just like Sunday mornings were just like the most enjoyable time to be woken up by my dad and brought into this space of like older folks and to be included. And I can remember the first time I, was in one of the scrimmages, and I faked one of the high school students out, and the whole team just went, oh, they were so like shocked, and just catching my dad's eye and seeing how proud he was of me and feeling so held in that moment. And there was never the thought of like, oh, look at this sissy, look at this. Like, this was my dad. This was the connection that we had that felt so powerful. And I could remember thinking like, yeah, I want to be, maybe not directly in that relation to that moment, but like to be a father myself and look down into a child's eyes and be able to transfer that love to them in a similar way. So I think anything that we do that lifts up the ideals of feminism and feminine traits also uplifts women and men in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Oh, Devin, you don't know this, but like your stories, I feel like you're creepily like in my mental diary. Like my dad used to wake, and my siblings, if they're listening to this, will know, my dad still does this, wakes us up singing good morning to you. And I used, and like, oh, dad, okay. But also you're like, this is amazing. And I used to go as a kid on the weekends to his soccer games all the time, both as a coach and when he was playing. And so there's so much of this. I'm like, Devin, what is the parallel happening here? I love this so very much. As you're talking about um, God, as you're talking about being a father and creating space for your sons to be able to be whole human beings that get to live at the intersection and the blend of masculine and feminine traits as that whole human that gets to have an active, healthy relationship with themselves in all aspects of that. Um, you've talked a little bit about like the eye-opening experiences of seeing younger you through these moments that you're like, oh, I have the power of presence. I have the power of leading the charge. I have the power of encouraging conversation. What elements of fatherhood and of raising your sons in what sounds like kind of like a new healed pocket? Again, the world is going to happen. There are going to be pain. There's going to be things that happen. But like, what has been, I guess, the most illuminating for you? And then maybe like healing or surprising that's come up with that?
Mm, yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the not healed, but healing,
Mhm.
um, which means that my son has seen me do a ton of crying. Um, they've seen me like not be Superman and to like be to have things affect me. And I think that has hopefully opened space for them to like not be perfect and to not have to hold the same things, uh, which is also scary as a father because knowing that like there's spaces of masculinity misconstrued and still exists very strongly, and like probably especially in sports where like you really have to, crying on the baseball field, like you can't just start crying. That's not what it is. So knowing that they'll get made fun of the moment of being vulnerable when I'm teaching them to be vulnerable. I think there's been like so many different moments of seeing that vulnerability in them and the healing process happening actively
Yeah.
between us. I think with my younger son, um, he does a, I was probably in a much better place when we had my younger son. So but he does a much better job uh, finding a balance between ways in which me and my wife show up in the world. And so he can handle like grief and sadness in a particular way that is surprising. I remember being in my living room here, about to watch the Maud Aubrey uh, video,
Yeah.
the Maud Aubrey murder, uh, kind of wanting to do it with my earphones in and seeing my 5-year old at the time, younger son, walk out of the bedroom that he shares with his older brother and like walk right up to me and ask me, like he's seen me cry, like an ugly cry. He's like, "Can I see?" And it was
Mhm.
just so shocking for me for him to want to know what was impacting me in that way. And at the time, I didn't really have the ability to like slow down enough to say what needed to be said. I kind of just like shooed him away,
Yeah.
um, and just like needing a little bit of space. And uh, I think it was just like startling for me to see someone who was that present to be okay with my tears, to like welcome them.
Yeah.
Um, and we were actually supposed to be playing a game together, like on our phone, but a Roblox game. I don't know if people are familiar, but this day and age, kids are getting on this app called Roblox. It has like a million different games. So like and love to play it. And that's what we were supposed to be doing. I just was
Yeah.
like gonna watch the video real quick. And so I went into their bedroom and was like ready to play the game, had wiped away my tears by the time I got in there, sat down on like area rug that's like in front of their bunk bed. And I like asked them, like, are you guys ready to play? And my older son picks up, gets his iPad. He's like, yeah, let's do it. But then my older son's like, why were you crying though? And for me, I was just like, why do people want to do this? It's like, of course, that's what you and their mom have been teaching them. So
Yeah.
um, I think it came to a point where I was like, okay, I have to share this with them. And I had talked to them about race a ton, but
Yeah.
there's like this very intellectual conversation that we have with our children as people of color about race, which is like, be prepared for this, know all of these things about our history. And
Yeah.
it's like very surface level. And for me, uh, I wanted to get beyond that the best I could, and I didn't know how, but I ended up finding searching for and finding uh, an audio clip of the incident. I didn't want to show them the video because it's like that's a bit too much for a 5 and 8 year old
Yeah.
to witness that and have that put into your mind. But I did want them to experience it and pushed play on this audio, took out my headphone, pushed play, and within just like moments of the reporter talking about the incident, my other son like on the bottom bunk, like with his legs curled to his chest and his hands over his ears, he's like shaking and like getting really emotional. And so I paused the video, the audio, sorry, and I like look across at him and like it's really heavy, right? You can like the weight of it, and it's like nodding. And my 5 year old is like, "What do you mean heavy?" Like, and for him, uh, he could I'm sure he could probably feel it, but like the idea of like something being too much to handle wasn't the case. And so, but I crawled over and I was like, I just mean like the like weight of it, you can feel it on your shoulders and chest. It's like kind of like a lot, right? He like nodded, and my older son is like, um, maybe he can get it because he can see us getting emotional, dad, but maybe he doesn't really fully understand. And like this 8 year old is like so knows so much, and I wanted to like call out to the fact that like I know that that's probably true that he may not be able to fully understand, and like that both of them may be too young to have to like grapple with this, but I know that they could both feel it in their bodies, and I didn't want them to grow up like me. And I started describing like how when I was young, I used to be just like my older son, and I would like cover my ears, and I would like you know try and push down all these emotions. And as I got to that part of trying to explain to him, my older son cuts in. He's like, "Dad, that makes no sense." Because like if you push the things down inside, that just means you have to carry the weight with you everywhere you go. And I was like, absolutely right.
Your
That's what I was
wisdom, yes.
trying to get to, and he got there a bit before me. And so like to again affirm for them that like I didn't want that for them to have to bury these things inside. That we think that sometimes not talking about the things or avoiding them makes it get better, but it actually doesn't make it get better. Some cases it makes it get worse.
Yeah.
As I like open this up and tell my son, like kind of get emotional again. And I see him like his lip is quivering, and he
Mm.
speaks up and he says that earlier that year that somebody called him poop on the bus,
Mm.
like, uh, and it was really weighted moment for me to be realizing that basically in the span of 30 years, the experiences that were happening to me as a child are happening to my son, and to know that like he's living in this time where George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery are being murdered name after name,
Yeah.
and at the same time I was going through Rodney King around that same age. So
Right.
it was really frustrating for me. And initially my first thought was like, I'm gonna, yeah, no, who is this kid? Like, let's go find them and like cause some trouble. Um, but I knew that like that wasn't really what my son needed in that moment. Just
Yeah.
to, like tell him that like I knew where he was coming from, that I'd had that experience, and that I want to open up the space for him to be able to share and talk about it. And in the process of us talking about it, I could see I could see his body going from this place of being down and like this to like the weight literally being lifted off him. So um, I think there was many moments of my son teaching me and informing me about ways in which we should be showing up in the world
Yeah.
to talk about these things, not hold on to them, to really give space to the things that are challenging to have these conversations.
And the other part of this, well, first of all, if anybody's listening to this not feeling this all over your body, I don't know what's going on. Maybe go rewind and let your body join us in this. Uh, the other part that I thought was so beautiful, first of all, you probably saw my head shaking, and like the wisdom of children is massive. And when we have been taught to not pay attention to ours, we detach from it as kids. But also having two different experiences of the same process. I mean, it's part of how, as human beings, we're not all programmed to experience the same events exactly the same, but creating space for our processing to be okay is so important. And so I think being able to not only be aware of your own experience, your own processing, and the fact that other people are processing it, hearing your 8-year-old be like, he doesn't, like, just hearing the processing that was happening out loud is fascinating, because again, as adults, we don't leave enough space for that. And we're supposed to be more fully developed. And having your two children experience this in different ways, but also in the same space with a father creating the space for them is a beautiful, I think, illustration of why it's important for us to not have one specific way, or one, like, this is the one way to do this, right? Or a playbook, because each and every one of us processes the world around us differently and has a different kind of myriad of experiences that are informing our body to react the way it does, and our emotions to react the way they do, and even our sense of safety to feel different. So I think there's such a gift too, and having two children at two different ages with different levels of exposure to this stuff is, it informs the kind of larger world that we're in at the same time.
Yeah, the differences between them and me, like
Yeah.
my younger son wanting to have the conversation, my older son somewhat not wanting to have the conversation, but in the way also needing to,
Yeah.
I think is so true to how we all experience things. Like what we talked about before, like there may need to be for some of us more moments of silence and more moments of like time where we talk about this thing that's really hard. And for others of us, we want to dive in right away. So being able to, I think most of my lessons about parenting have come in a moment where I have like either no idea what I'm doing or I mess up, and then it's like them pointing out how I messed up. So
And you're like, you love me, but you said that very directly, so I couldn't avoid the feedback. Thank you so much.
right.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you, in your, not only are you doing this as a parent, as the former slash, I think, still peacekeeper, by creating these spaces for conversation with your parents, with your like with your family that are not your children, but you also do this at work. You create spaces for people to be able to step into storytelling and the power of storytelling. And again, I think I said this earlier, but we're constantly being encouraged to share our story and use our voice, but in a world that hasn't really cared about many of our voices. And if we did use our microphone to use our voices, we're expected to kind of follow the script of what is appropriate for who we are, what we look like, where we come from, where we want to go. How do you kind of see this in the, okay, this isn't necessarily in the family unit, but this is out like where we are in the workplace, or this is part of a group that I have a specific identity within this group that they're either expecting me to have, or they don't know me yet, but something about the way I'm presenting myself in the room has them making assumptions about me. And then being like, all right, let's dive into a story that's going to make you feel all these things.
Right.
What has, I will be saying this in the intro, I know, but I will just reiterate again, being able to be one of those people in a workshop with you that you were leading, that I walked into a room full of strangers and was being asked to bring stories to the forefront. And as somebody that loves stories, has a podcast where we're doing this, right?
Yeah.
It was such a wonderful gift how you created that space and you and your team created that space. But also, I think, as you were saying, the kind of we of it all, the contributions from everybody else creating kind of the spoken and unspoken agreement that we had as a group on creating space for us to share our stories and use our voice, and each person being so different. um how has like being the lead, being the facilitator, being the person that's creating and holding that space, um what if somebody's thinking about, oh yeah, I really want to share my story, but or I know that here are the 4 stories that are safe for me to tell, or the one story that I can tell about myself that's my bio on my website.
Yeah.
How do you kind of hold or create space, or what kind of encouragement do you give people as they're trying to scratch the surface of vulnerability a little bit more significantly than either they have when they've told stories in the past, or they're just like, I've never told my story because I'm so afraid. How do
Yeah.
you think about kind of setting the stage for that?
That's a really great question. Um, I I think for me, I like to lead by like following.
Mm,
I like to lead by following, listening, um, and probably to the same effect of like what my sons do for me, and especially my younger son, like listens in a way that uh, requires me to tell the thing that's between the lines because you can hear it, but I'm not fully saying it. And so I think I enter into those spaces with like a really desire for a high level of attentiveness that can hear what people want to say, but they're either like afraid to say or like not sure if it's okay to say. Um, and I think leading the listening and the following, but then also being vulnerable myself, um, hopefully allows people to know that like this is a space where vulnerability is encouraged, and you get to show up like as much of yourself as you choose, um, so that it feels like a call, um, as opposed to like a push. People to be able to share the thing that's important, meaningful to them.
yeah.
Um, and then I think it does get away from the idea of like I have these 4 stories. These are the stories that I tell. Um, when people see the like vulnerability and the authenticity and the like, we're going off script here to places where there's uncertainty, and it's okay to not have the answers yet. And I think the spaces that I love to show up in, both as like a leader and as a person like contributing, is like fully in love with uncertainty and revision. One of my favorite authors, Kiesa Lehman, talks a ton about revision and ability to like go back to the thing that you were doing before and to dig deeper and find layers, levels of understanding within it. And if
Yeah.
you're not doing that, then what are you learning in life, and how are you learning to? I think this is like the area that I'm going into more recently. Like, how are you learning to love yourself more?
Mm,
Um, and I think that's generally how I try and go into spaces specifically around storytelling, because all of us have so many stories from our lives, and to bring out stories that you maybe have told before, but there may be more behind it. I know that very well for myself. The hiding
yeah.
within story, like even when I shared that first grade story with you about the cooties game, I could feel myself going into like, oh shoot, like I'm becoming the 6-year-old. This is going to be a bit much. I have
Yeah.
a choice now to like, am I going to embody the lived experience, share it from 6-year-old, or am I going to share it as 37-year-old Devin has enough space and healed enough from it? So I don't think I went into the full 6-year-old version, um,
Right.
which is also okay. That like there's moments when I can go in, I can choose to be at a like higher altitude. I think we talked about
Yeah.
quite a bit when we were in our space together. Um, but just letting the people decide where they want to be, um, giving nudges,
Yeah.
calls, and not pushes.
And no, I think one of the other things that I learned, and I love how vocal you all were with this, was that like your story is going to be told differently every time you tell it. So don't get too anchored in the specificity of needing to get every beat exactly the same every time you tell a story. When I was doing my first TEDx talk, we had a speaking coach, shouldn't use air quotes. We had a speaking coach. Let me put those air quotes away. The reason I use the air quotes is because there was a lot of kind of shame associated with having your own style of doing it. There was a prescription, there was a formula you were supposed to use. There was like, you need to know exactly where your commas are. You need to know exactly where, the pauses are. You need to time it out like to the second. And it was fascinating because it's not the way I operate in life. I don't do well with that. But the more I tried to do it, the more I disappeared from my story. And so giving that, I mean, you actively saying like, you're going to forget things, you're going to add new things, you're going to remember new things about it. It doesn't make your story any more or less viable, valuable, or true. It was such a gift because I do think oftentimes when we have a story, I think about interviewing, right? You have to have the perfect answer to every question when you're going for a job interview, or, when you are thinking about like, I think like a best man speech or something, like you got to get it right. But like, that's supposed to be fun. That's supposed to be joyous. The storytelling, isn't supposed to be so regimented, but the way we are taught in school, it is to like do it the one right way. And so creating space for there to be slip ups, there to be like, oh, whoops, I got that a little wrong. Or, oh my goodness, I just remembered this part of this story right now. For humanity to be part of that story is what makes it even more impactful and even more healing, one, for the individual, but two, creates that invitation, that kind of call for the space of being like, oh my goodness, I haven't said that before. Oh, you know what? I actually don't remember how that went down, because that's how our brain works. Like just the bringing that to the space gives so much permission for us to be able to actually be present in that moment versus being so far ahead to take care of ourselves and so far back. When I coach people, I'm always talking about like, how is your body feeling? Do you feel like you're like reaching and desperately grasping for something? Or do you feel like you're anchoring back and like in your center of gravity to protect yourself from what's coming? And how can we move to kind of that present moment of foundational stability, but also knowing that there's going to be stuff we don't know how to handle. And without that permission, we do tend to get stuck either too far or too back, or just swinging back and forth and getting all like nauseous from it. So I think that that's like what you're talking about. And again, what you modeled, being somebody that got to be in the space. I think that your ability to ask questions and create space for us to listen between the lines to ourselves. So thank you so much to your son for that too, because I feel like that came through. And I think that following part is really powerful. It's the opposite of what we're taught a leader does. We're taught that a leader leads and everybody else follows. And it isn't about how can we cohesively move forward together. And so I think that that is, again, to me, this is why I do the work I do. Feminine leadership dynamics like very much talk about the fact that we are a collective and how important it is to be able to honor that. And I feel like you walk the walk on that all the time. Okay. I've got like all these, I want to have like 5 conversations. I told you this already. One of the things that I like nerded out about before we hopped on, I'd love to hear your take on this, and then we'll end because I know we've gone long as I expected. I read your Medium article that you just posted recently about the barbershop being a real life Wakanda for Black men and really the Black community. I thought it was such a beautiful piece. So I will be sure to link it in the show notes for everybody to read. But I'd love to hear more from you about that. Cause like, I was like, oh, yep. And so like relevant for the moment, but also I think big picture, our culture is becoming more aware of barbershop culture. There was the whole movie series like 10 years ago, but there's still so much more understanding, I think, of the LeBron James show. That's like, there's just more of a window into a space that has such, reminds me of the 2 twins you were talking about earlier, a space where you can be a human being, a full human being when the world doesn't necessarily let you. So before I just start talking all the way through it, I would love to hear a little bit more about the article and kind of what brought you to it.
Yeah. The conversation and the things that you're bringing up feel like so aligned in like what was just talked about leading forward. I can really feel the attention and the time that you've taken. So really appreciative of that. I think for me, the article and Medium in general, something new for me, came from a place of what you were talking about. Do you feel like you're reaching forward for something, like really struggling, or you feel like you're in the back? And so I've been writing and working on my book, a memoir about my uncle, and the process of speaking up with my mom and my family, and having my son inform me about so many things that I've done poorly, and still working on. And in that process of working on the book, there's always, not always, but often this thought of like the editor and how do I get them to want this thing? And I'm like, kind of like, oh, what do they want? And like being in a place where they're the ones driving the narrative and they don't even want that because it's not what's going to get the best writing. But in my body, in my mind, it's like that reaching forward and other moments just being really slow and like back behind, caught in the past, wanting to do things. So I started doing like medium posts, these poetry things where I could just like almost like write at the edge of my pen, the end of my fingers, like allow the things to flow out of it. So that particular piece, I had just watched Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I'd actually gone with my older son for his birthday. He turned uh, 11 in the theater, so it was pretty cool.
So,
So we had gone there and I was watching it. There was several moments of like obviously things that were happening on the screen that were so powerful, but then for me, the things that were powerful were like watching my son watching this film and to know that like he's seeing Black excellence, and even seeing people like get up, no spoiler alerts, but getting up before the like closing scenes add the extra things at the end. And so like us staying and me like him getting up and like put his jacket on. I'm like, nah, like we don't have anywhere to go. Like, we're gonna
yeah.
sit here through all the music, and then there being more scenes. Him like understanding that like he could sit and remain, like put his head on my shoulder, and I'm like, yeah, feeling very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And it was reminding me of taking my sons to the barber shop and having this feeling of like we're here, and it's taking a long time, and it's supposed to take a long time, and the like excellence that is us when we are being ourselves, like going inside of a barber shop, being disconnected from the world that tells us like, all right, keep it moving. Like, what's the next thing? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And how do I fit to this expectations and these norms? And wanting to take my sons to the barber shop and allowing them to choose the haircut that they get,
Yes.
um, and letting them have forms of their own identity, how they want to show up, even if that means like not going to the barber shop and be ready
Right.
to feast. Some people have like, I'm not going to the barber shop anymore. Like I don't need to
Yeah.
like fix myself. I'm gonna let my hair grow out. I'm let it lock. So I think having the feeling of the barber shop and what it means to take the choice about your identity and to have a form of like resistance within the like existence of who you are being a really powerful moment. So I just wrote from that space of uh, both sitting in that moment in theater with my son, but then having that feeling before the barbershop and knowing that like it's such a powerful place for me and to disconnect from the world for a moment, to take time to go extra slow. So
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And truly, I feel like when you were just talking about your initial other story and those your two friends and them creating that space of respite of just like we can be people here. You don't have to be anybody other than who you are in this moment. And having that moment with your son recently of like, we could just be right now. It's okay to be, it's okay to absorb, it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling is like, again, you've said this so many times, but like the healing and the I went to one of my therapists, it was parts work, right? Of healing that part of yourself that was in this moment of like hustle and stress and go, 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 or this environment's not safe for you. Being able to create that space for yourself at 37 is a wonderful way to heal that part, but also again, to witness a smaller version of you kind of having that actively happen is such a wonderful gift. I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so excited to read your memoir when it comes out.
thank
Like,
you.
if anybody's listening to this and isn't excited, I feel like they don't know what a good story is. You've told so many wonderful stories because it's just who you are. It's how amazing you are at this. Um,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining today. We talked about such important things, and I know there's even more to talk about. But before you go, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Best way for people to connect with me is through my website and uh, my newsletter. I share all types of really open things that are, to your point, not an expert who knows everything and everything's scripted, but
Yeah.
somebody who wants to learn with others, which
Yeah.
means being uncertain and like searching within the writing. And it's a space where I try and be as vulnerable as I can and encourage others to find a place where they can share things. I know other people have things that they want to share, but they're looking for the right person to share it with. And so I hope that's what the space feels like for others. I'm also on social media, just at Devan Sandiford, on all the different social media platforms. And as you said, Medium, a new place where I'm sharing things. So uh, find me everywhere.
Yes. And again, these will all be in the show notes. So if you weren't able to do all that really quickly and your fingers on your phone as we were doing it, don't worry. There's a whole page for this. Devan, thank you feels like it's not enough, but thank you so much for joining today. I am beyond grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. I could say the same at the other end. I don't know if thank you is enough. I feel like this conversation has been so enriching and so many layers, levels of connection between us. It was actually you that informed me to power on my grandma's war story. So I'm so grateful to be here and to learn with you in our conversation. So looking forward to part two. I'm going to
Heck
manifest
yeah.
that, speak it out into the universe.
And also, can we just acknowledge, I feel like our grandmas would hang out.
Yeah. So my grandma loves to talk.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I told you Devan was amazing, didn't I? I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I hung up being like, wait, I had so much more I wanted to talk about. So I hope that he and I get a chance to hopefully hop on again, maybe chat here or create some amazing collaboration for you to be able to join us. He is next level. I hope that you walked away with some of the incredible wisdom he dropped, maybe took note of some of the resources he shared. If you are not on his newsletter, please get on it. If you go to nikkyinnocent.com/podcast, we will have his show notes page there for you to be able to check out and to learn from so much of the incredible wisdom he shared. I can't even, I'm still overtaken by it. And also some of the links and stuff that I shared, if you're interested in hearing more about some of the statistics around masculinity or around what it has been like for men to be able to step into their vulnerability or not step into their vulnerability, I want to make sure that you have access to that information, because so often we're not able to lean into our humanity, especially as those of us that identify as male. When you're seeing that you need to stay in that man box, sometimes it can be really, really hard to break free of the confines of what that means. And so in this episode, I hope you were given a little bit of permission or invitation from Devan to explore what that might be like. But I also think it's so important sometimes for us to break those patterns, to have some proof, to have some information that can help us feel even more bolstered when maybe emotionally it doesn't feel safe to do so. So thank you for being here today. I am so grateful for this conversation to have been had, and truly get ready. Make sure that you know when Devan's memoir comes out, because we know it's going to be full of some amazing stories. I will catch you on the next episode, my friends.